I walked into my house expecting laughter and hugs. Instead, I found 2 police officers and my 5-year-old daughter sobbing on the couch. My own mother and sister had called the cops on her, over a toy. They told the officers she was aggressive, she was 5. That moment shattered something in me, not because I was surprised, but because deep down I'd always known they never truly saw her, or me, as family. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I planned. And 1 week later they were the ones begging for mercy. The door clicked softly behind me as I stepped into the house, the key still warm in my hand. I hadn't planned to be home this early. A cancelled client meeting in Seattle gave me the chance to catch the red eye and surprise Ellie with donuts in the morning. Instead, I walked into a living room, frozen in chaos. 2 uniformed officers stood stiffly near the couch. One was writing something in a small pad. The other, young, alert, was crouched in front of my daughter. Ellie sat curled in the corner of the couch, arms pinned to her sides like she was bracing for impact. Her head hung low, and her tiny shoulders trembled. Her socks were mismatched, her dress wrinkled like she'd been tugged around. I froze for a full second before anyone noticed me. Then the younger officer turned, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his hip. He didn't draw his weapon, but the positioning was enough. A silent statement. A barrier. Behind the officers stood my mother, Lois, arms folded, lips pursed in a familiar expression of icy disappointment. Amanda, my sister, lingered by the side, holding her daughter Sophie like a prop in a courtroom. Sophie had a tear on her cheek and a cracker in her hand. She wasn't crying now, just watching the room like she knew she'd won something. "Good morning," the officer said cautiously. "You must be Natalie Carter, Ellie's mother." I nodded, too stunned to speak. My eyes darted to Ellie. She still hadn't looked up. What's going on here?" "There was a call about a child dispute," he said. "We were informed a child was pushed. We were told the mother was out of town, so we've been speaking with the grandmother and aunt." My gaze shot to Lois. Her expression didn't waver. Amanda didn't meet my eyes. "You called the police?" "On a 5-year-old, Amanda jumped in. She shoved Sophie, she hit her. Sophie was crying so hard we were worried she was hurt." I looked at Sophie, no marks, no bruises, not even a red spot. Then at Ellie, still trembling, her eyes now shiny with unshed tears. "She didn't hit," I said, stepping towards my daughter. "She's 5. She doesn't even understand what's happening right now." "She pushed her," Lois said sharply. "And when we tried to explain why that was wrong, she got mouthy. We thought a little visit from the police might help her understand consequences." My stomach turned. I crouched next to Ellie and gently placed a hand on her back. She flinched at first, then collapsed into my chest, her sobs muffled against my shoulder. The older officer, the one taking notes, spoke for the first time. "We don't typically intervene in behavioural issues involving kindergarten-aged children, but we're required to respond to every call." He gave a quick look towards Lois and Amanda. Not approving, assessing. Then it happened. The younger officer, still crouched beside us, gave me a look I'll never forget. It was cautious, measured, like he wasn't sure who the unstable one in the room was, and in that moment I realised something chilling. He wasn't just protecting Ellie from the others. He was protecting her from me too. At least that's what he'd been led to believe. That hit harder than Lois's glare, harder than Amanda's self-righteous frown. Because somehow, without even being there, I'd been painted as a possible danger. I, the mother who'd worked double shifts, who'd bought Amanda's groceries more times than I could count, who'd let Lois back into our lives despite a childhood full of silence and cold hands. I looked up at the officer and said quietly, "I'm taking my daughter home now." He nodded slowly. "There's no cause for further action. We've documented statements. No signs of harm. The child is shaken but safe." He stood and faced Lois directly. "This is not what emergency services are for. If something like this happens again, it could be considered a misuse of public resources." Lois opened her mouth to reply, but he cut her off with a glance and a tight nod. Then both officers walked out, leaving the door ajar behind them. Ellie clung to me like I was the last solid thing in a world gone sideways. The door closed behind the officers with a final weighted click. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was electric, brimming with tension that no one wanted to touch first. I held Ellie tighter, her small frame pressed against me like she was trying to disappear into my chest. Her breathing was shaky but slower now, her tears still dampening my blouse. Lois cleared her throat, arms still folded like she was the only adult left in the room. "We did what we thought was necessary," she said, her voice sharp as a ruler edge. "A real wake-up call. You're raising a little girl who thinks she's the centre of the universe." I turned my head slowly towards her. My pulse pounded in my ears. "You brought uniformed men with guns into this house for a 5-year-old. She was acting out, Amanda chimed in, rocking Sophie like she was some fragile porcelain doll. "You weren't here. She screamed at us when we told her to share, then she pushed Sophie." Wait, I stood up slowly, Ellie still in my arms. "And instead of talking to her, comforting her, or calling me, you decided to traumatise her." "She needed consequences," Lois snapped. "And so do you, apparently." That was it. My breaking point. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to shout. I was done performing for their twisted version of family. Ellie's fingers tugged lightly at my collar. I glanced down. Her cheeks were blotchy, eyes red, but she looked up at me with something rawer than fear, something like betrayal. "Mummy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Grandma said if I didn't stop being bad, you'd be so mad. You'd leave me. Like Daddy." My breath caught. Every muscle in my body locked for a second. I crouched slowly, setting Ellie down so I could meet her eyes directly. "Who told you that?" Her bottom lip trembled. She nodded towards Lois. Lois scoffed from behind us. "Oh, for God's sake, I told her actions have consequences. I didn't say you'd abandon her." But that's what Ellie heard. That's what she believed, that if she cried too loud or held onto a toy too tightly, she'd be left behind. Just like I used to feel. Just like I did for years growing up in this exact same house. The hurt twisted inside me like a knife. I stood up, turned fully towards Lois and Amanda, and found my voice, not loud but sharp, clear and unwavering. "You will never be alone with my daughter again. Not ever." Amanda blinked, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. Lois's lips tightened into a thin, disapproving line. "Natalie, don't be ridiculous. Families argue. They disagree." "This isn't disagreement," I said. "This is damage. You frightened my child. You told her I'd leave her. You called the police on her." Amanda took a step forward. "But what about Sophie and Ellie? They've always played together." "Oh no, Sophie was a prop in your performance. And Ellie, she was your scapegoat." Lois rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting. This martyr complex of yours is exhausting." I almost laughed. "Funny. You think boundaries are drama and manipulation is love. I see it now. I didn't when I was a child, but I do now." I picked up Ellie again, kissed her temple. "Go get your dragon book, baby. We'll read it in the car." She nodded and shuffled down the hall with slow, quiet steps. Amanda spoke again, her voice a strained whisper. "So that's it? You're cutting us off?" "I'm protecting my daughter," I said, "which is more than either of you ever did for me." Lois shook her head, muttering something under her breath, but I didn't care. I was already walking towards the door. As Ellie returned with her book hugged tight to her chest, I opened it wide. We walked out together, the late morning sun casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Behind us, the house that once tried to convince me it was home now just looked like another place I escaped from. When I was 9, I cried in public once, just once. We were at the grocery store and I wanted the frosted cereal with the cartoon dragon on it. Lois said no. I burst into tears. Not a tantrum, just honest, messy sadness that leaked out of me before I could swallow it. She didn't yell. She didn't even look angry. She just bent down, got very close to my ear and whispered, "Don't make a scene. Behave with dignity." That phrase carved itself into my bones. From then on, I learned to lock my emotions away. Crying became weakness. Anger meant I was unstable. Sadness meant I was manipulative. And joy, real unfiltered joy, was dangerous because it could be taken away the second it became too much. Amanda never had that problem. She was the model child, polite, poised, a mirror of Lois. She spoke softly, dressed neatly, and never, ever questioned anything. While I was told to stop being dramatic, Amanda was praised for her maturity. We were only a year apart, but it felt like generations. I remember one Thanksgiving, I was maybe 10, when I accidentally knocked over a bowl of cranberry sauce. It splattered across the tablecloth like a murder scene. Lois didn't yell. She simply stared, then calmly told me to go to my room. Amanda, who once spilled an entire glass of milk on the couch, was comforted. Accidents happen, Lois had said that day. But for me, mistakes weren't accidents, they were evidence. Growing up, I wasn't grounded, I was silenced, I wasn't punished, I was erased. That night, after the police visit, I couldn't sleep. Ellie had finally dozed off beside me after hours of holding on, like I was the only stable ground she had left. I stared at the ceiling and thought about all the ways I tried to convince myself that my family was just complicated. But complicated doesn't send cops to your house over a toy dispute. Complicated doesn't tell a child her mother might leave her. The next morning, I opened the hall closet, looking for a box of old photo albums to distract Ellie with. Instead, I found a dusty manila envelope labelled Residential Application, St. Grace Academy. It was dated from the year I turned 12. I sat on the floor, opened it with shaking fingers, and found the paperwork for a private boarding school, one town over, known for rigid structure and high emotional discipline. I remembered the name. Lois used to say it in passing, usually after I cried too hard or slammed a door. I always thought it was a threat, a bluff, but here it was, signed papers, a filled-out application, even a letter from Lois herself outlining my behavioural concerns and her desire for a more structured environment. I wasn't just the black sheep. I was the mistake she tried to correct, and she would have sent me away if my dad hadn't intervened. His handwriting was on the bottom of the application. I do not consent to this placement. Natalie belongs at home. I hadn't seen his writing in years. Dad, gentle, soft-spoken, barely a ripple in the household chaos. But somehow, silently, he had stopped her. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. All this time I thought I'd imagined the coldness, that maybe I was too sensitive, too emotional, but it was real, documented, filed away like a broken appliance warranty. Lois had wanted me gone, and now, decades later, she was trying to convince my daughter that she might be left too. I folded the papers, put them back in the envelope, and hid it away again. But I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unknow it. She hadn't changed. Not really. She'd just swapped her target. Guilt is a shapeshifter. It doesn't always come loud or heavy. Sometimes it tiptoes in during the quietest moments, like when you're brushing your daughter's hair and she leans into your hand like it's the only safe place left. That morning, after finding the boarding school application, I watched Ellie eat her cereal, her small hands gripping the spoon with quiet concentration. She didn't know what I'd discovered, what I'd remembered, but she looked at me with total trust, and that trust stabbed through my chest like a blade made of every decision I'd second-guessed. I had let Lois back into our lives, not out of naivety, but out of hope. Hope that maybe, after Dad died, Lois had softened, that maybe, just maybe, grief had cracked something open in her, something resembling love. I wanted Ellie to have what I never did, a grandmother who baked cookies, a cousin to play dress-up with, a family that didn't feel like a test you were destined to fail. So I ignored the little signs, the backhanded comments, the subtle corrections in front of Ellie, the way Lois's eyes always narrowed when Ellie got too loud, too silly, too real. I made excuses. She's old-fashioned, she means well. She's grieving. But the truth is, I didn't want Ellie to grow up feeling alone the way I did. I thought if I kept the peace, if I smoothed the edges, I could give her the family I never had. And I failed. Except, maybe I hadn't. Because Ellie was nothing like me at 5. She wasn't afraid to say no. She pushed back, she spoke her mind, even when it cost her. She didn't know how to hide her emotions yet, and I realised that was a gift. I hadn't taught her to bury herself just to survive. I taught her she was allowed to feel. She was everything I had been before Lois taught me to shrink. And this time I wasn't going to stand by. I wasn't going to play silent like Dad had, passing warm glances while the frost crept in. I loved him, but he never stood between me and the cold. He was a blanket, not a shield. I would be the shield. Later that day, I opened an old file drawer looking for Ellie's immunisation records. Instead, I found a folder labelled College Info Natalie. I paused, heart racing. I remembered applying for a scholarship back in senior year, one that could have taken me across the country. I'd worked on that essay for weeks, checked every box on the form, printed it on crisp paper. But I never heard back. Lois told me I didn't get it. She said the committee wasn't impressed, and somehow I believed her. I thought maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I didn't shine bright enough. My fingers trembled as I opened the folder. The essay was there, the recommendation letters. But the last page, the mailing confirmation, was blank. No postmark, no stamp, no receipt. The application had never been sent. I flipped to the back. A sticky note in Lois's handwriting clung to the final page. Too far, not practical, reconsider options. I laughed. Short, bitter. She hadn't sent it. She had made the decision for me. I thought about what that year could have been. Living on a campus, exploring a world beyond this house, escaping her grip. But Lois never wanted me to leave. She wanted me close, contained, dependent. Even now, years later, she was trying to wrap her fingers around Ellie too. I sat back, clutching the folder like it might turn into ash in my hands. She hadn't changed, not even a little. She'd just evolved, smiled a little more, complimented my cooking, pretended to play the doting grandmother. But underneath it all, she was still the same cold strategist, always calculating how to keep control. Ellie wouldn't be the next me. I wouldn't let her. That evening, after Ellie had gone to bed, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a stack of envelopes and a knot in my stomach. For years, I had treated my financial support to my family like an unavoidable tax, unpleasant but necessary. I never questioned it, never added it up. That night, I did. I started a spreadsheet, nothing fancy, just names, amounts, dates, the electricity bills Lois used to ask for help with, the unexpected water heater replacement, Amanda's car loan payments, emergency dental work, gas money, groceries, Sophie's therapy. I scrolled through months of bank statements and credit card charges, each one tied to a phone call that started with, "I hate to ask," and ended with, "You understand, don't you?" By the time I hit the total column, I felt sick. Not because of the number, though it was shocking. Over 40% of my income had been funneled into keeping their lives afloat. No, what made me nauseous was realising that I had financed my own erasure. Lois and Amanda had never said thank you. Not really. They'd never paid back a dime. And now, after everything, after calling the police on my child, they were still expecting me to show up with my wallet open and my mouth shut. I was about to close the laptop when a ping alerted me to a new email. The subject line read, "Payment confirmation invoice hash 7,749. I almost deleted it without opening. I assumed it was another automatic receipt. But something made me click. The email wasn't addressed to me. It was forwarded from Amanda's email, probably by mistake. Attached was a PDF invoice for $487. Itemised as Playhouse Castle Deluxe Set, Doll Collection, Pink Swan Edition, Custom Toy Storage Unit. Not a plumber. Not a broken water heater. Toys, expensive ones. From a boutique children's store in town. The shipping address, Lois's house. I stared at the invoice. My breath caught in my throat. This was the emergency that I'd wired $500 for last week. The same money Lois said was for a leak in the laundry room. The same money she claimed she needed before mould set in. And it had gone to a playhouse. For Sophie. Twist 5 slammed into me like a gut punch. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just sat there, staring at that pink castle with its feathered canopies and glitter decals, and felt something calcify inside me. This wasn't just about money, it never was. This was about control, about keeping me on the hook, about making sure I felt obligated, indebted. And the second I pulled away, even a little, they lashed out. They didn't just want my help, they wanted my servitude. I thought back to all the times Lois had dismissed my parenting, all the times Amanda played the single mum sympathy card, while treating me like the family ATM. And now, knowing they had used my daughter's fear and pain to try to manipulate me back into line, it broke something clean in half. I closed the laptop, no more. That night, I logged into my bank account and cancelled every recurring payment I had set up for Lois and Amanda. The auto payments to the utility accounts I didn't control. The direct deposits to Amanda's car loan, the $180 monthly buffer Lois always claimed was for miscellaneous necessities. Gone. All of it. For a few blissful hours I felt powerful, clean, like I had finally stepped off the hamster wheel of guilt and self-sacrifice. I tucked Ellie into bed with an extra long story, kissed her forehead, and told myself tomorrow would be better. At 11:12 p.m, my phone rang. I stared at the screen. Lois. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I was tired of silence, tired of pretending I didn't hear the knock before the door slammed open. I answered. "You cut the payments," she said without preamble. "I did," I replied evenly. There was a beat of silence, then a sharp inhale. "I can't afford my medication without that money," she said. "If I skip a dose, my heart—" I closed my eyes. "Then call your doctor, or Medicare, or Amanda. You know Amanda can't afford it, and I'm not asking for luxuries. I need this, Natalie. This is life or death." "No," I said softly but firmly. "It's not. Because if it were, you wouldn't have spent that last emergency on a pink castle and $1,000 doll set." Silence. "I saw the invoice, Mum. Amanda sent it by accident. Don't bother denying it. You don't understand how hard it is. I understand perfectly. You lied again." There was a pause. Then she shifted tactics. "I just don't want to see Sophie grow up feeling like she has less than—" I cut her off. "Sophie is not my child. Ellie is, and I will not sacrifice her peace so you can live like nothing's changed. You're being cruel." "No, I'm being clear." There was a rustling sound, and then she spat. "I hope you sleep well, knowing your mother might not wake up tomorrow because you decided to be petty." She hung up. I stood in the dark kitchen, phone still in hand, pulse racing. I was shaking, but not with fear, with fury. For so long I'd let guilt be my compass. But now I could see how they weaponized it, especially Lois. I didn't hear the tiny footsteps until it was too late. Ellie stood in the hallway in her pyjamas, clutching her piggy bank. "I heard Grandma," she said quietly. "Is she sick?" I knelt down, heart breaking. "She says she is, honey, but she'll be okay." She held out a crumpled $5 bill. "Here, for her medicine." Twist 6 hit like a punch to the throat. I took the bill from her gently, held her small hands in mine. "Sweetheart, thank you. That's very kind, but you don't have to fix this." Tears welled up in her eyes. "But if she's sick, and we don't help her, she might—" I pulled her into my lap, wrapped my arms around her tightly. "Ellie," I whispered, "listen to me. Grown-ups are supposed to take care of kids, not the other way around. And no one is allowed to make you feel scared, so you'll give them something. That's not love. That's manipulation." She sniffled. "She said you'd be mad if I didn't help." I kissed her forehead. "I'm not mad at you. I'm proud of you for being generous. But from now on, no one gets to make you scared on purpose, not even Grandma." Her little head nodded against my chest. That night, I tucked her back into bed, the $5 bill sitting quietly on my nightstand. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't money, it was a line, and Lois had crossed it for the last time. By Monday morning, I was ready to move forward. I had drawn my lines, made my decisions. What I didn't expect was how fast the fallout would spread. Ellie clung to my hand as we walked through the preschool gates, her little fingers squeezing mine tighter than usual. She didn't say anything, but I could feel the hesitation in her steps. And then I saw it, the subtle shift in energy around us, conversations that paused mid-sentence, quick glances that darted away too late, smiles that never reached the eyes. We passed a group of moms by the sandbox, women I'd chatted with for months, swapped snack ideas and pick-up tips with. But this morning they turned slightly, their voices dipping to hushed tones. One of them, Marcy, who usually made a big show of waving at Ellie, looked past us like we weren't even there. Inside, Ellie walked quietly to her cubby, while I lingered a moment longer. Miss Sanders, her teacher, offered a warm smile, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I almost asked what was going on, but something told me I'd find out soon enough. Back in the parking lot, I checked my phone. A notification blinked. Forwarded email from another parent, subject line, "Concerned?" I opened it. There, in plain text, was a message that had clearly made the rounds. Several of you have asked about the incident involving the Carter child, Ellie. It's come to my attention that this isn't an isolated behavioural issue. Police were called to the home due to aggression concerns. The child has been flagged for emotional instability. For the safety of all our kids, please be mindful during shared playtimes. It wasn't signed. No sender name. No direct email address. Just a burner account, most likely. Attached was a screenshot of a document. Blurred but recognisable. A police report header. Date matching the morning Lois and Amanda called the cops. The text wasn't even accurate, just vague paraphrasing and highlighted phrases like officer response and child dispute. Twist 7 hit hard. Someone had taken a deeply personal, traumatic moment and weaponised it against a 5-year-old. Against my 5-year-old. I stared at the screen, a tight, hot rage blooming in my chest. Whoever sent it wanted Ellie marked, wanted her ostracised, and based on the looks I just received, and it was working. I walked slowly back to the car, mind racing. Only a handful of people knew the full story. Fewer had access to that report, and all of them had one thing in common: my last name. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it so tightly my knuckles went white. This wasn't just gossip, this was sabotage, strategic, personal, and cruel. It wasn't enough for Lois and Amanda to scare my daughter in our own home. Now they wanted the world to see her as broken, dangerous. They wanted to isolate her, just like they had done to me. I took a deep breath, eyes stinging. They wanted a fight. They were about to get one. The next morning, I walked straight into the preschool office before the bell even rang. Ellie was with Miss Sanders, safe in her classroom, and I wasn't leaving until this ended. The director, Mrs. Benton, was waiting behind the glass door. She stood when I entered, her hands folded over a manila folder. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "I assume this is about the email?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "And it's going to be the last one." She motioned for me to sit. I didn't. "I want it in writing," I said. "Effective immediately. No one besides me or my verified emergency contacts is to approach or interact with Ellie. No visits, no messages, nothing." Mrs. Benton nodded, already reaching for a form. "We can update the approved contact list and circulate it to staff. I understand your concern. I also want to flag 2 individuals, Lois Carter and Amanda Parker, as restricted. If they come near Ellie or attempt to pick her up, I expect you to notify me and call security." "I will," she said. "We'll treat this as a potential safety matter." I exhaled, the kind that rattled on the way out. Mrs. Benton hesitated, then added, "I did some digging. The email, it came from a Gmail account registered under the name Blakely." My blood turned cold. Ellie's father, Ryan Blakely. He hadn't been in touch in over 4 years. No visits, a handful of child support checks, birthday cards that looked like they were written by an intern. I hadn't even said his name in months. "Are you sure?" I asked, heart pounding. Mrs. Benton nodded. "We confirmed the recovery email tied to the account. It links back to his professional profile." Twist 8 had a name, and it wore a familiar face I hadn't seen in far too long. I left the office in a blur and drove straight home. My hands trembled as I dug out my old phone from the junk drawer, the one I kept for backup where his number still lived in the contact list. I pressed call. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello?" "It's Natalie." A beat of silence. "Wow, it's been... Did you send an email about Ellie to her school?" Another pause. Look, I just heard some things, and I thought people should know." "You haven't spoken to your daughter in 4 years. What exactly do you know?" "Your mum told me about the incident with the cops. She said Ellie was getting unstable." I closed my eyes. "So you decided to smear a 5-year-old based on second-hand gossip." "I just thought..." "No," I snapped. "You didn't think. You parroted Lois again, just like you did when we divorced." "She sounded worried," he mumbled. "She's manipulative, Ryan. She's been manipulating all of us for years. But Ellie is off limits." "I didn't mean any harm. You caused it anyway." I hung up. And then I stood in the kitchen, my palms flat against the counter, breathing through a whirlwind of rage. Of course it was Lois. She couldn't reach me directly anymore, so she went through the one person spineless enough to act on her behalf. She didn't just weaponise my past. She dragged Ellie's absentee father into her war. I turned on my laptop and began compiling documents, screenshots, emails, copies of texts, a printed photo of the invoice for the playhouse, a signed affidavit from Miss Sanders about Ellie's temperament in class. If Lois and Amanda wanted to play this game, I would bring the law into it. That afternoon, I opened the county website and began filing for a no-contact order. Not for me, for Ellie. It started with a knock. Not loud, not frantic, just soft enough to make me wonder if I imagined it. I peeked through the window and saw Amanda standing on the porch, holding a glittery gift bag and a smile so forced it could have been glued on. Her daughter Sophie stood beside her in matching bows, eyes darting around like she wasn't sure why they were here either. I didn't want to open the door. But Ellie heard the knock and came running, still in her dinosaur pyjamas, excitement lighting up her face. "Is that Aunt Amanda?" she asked. My chest tightened. I opened the door. Amanda lit up like a Christmas tree. "Hi, Ellie Bug, we brought you something." Ellie beamed. "For me?" "Yes, sweetie," Amanda said, handing over the bag. "Just a little surprise. We were in the neighbourhood." I raised an eyebrow. Our neighbourhood was 20 minutes from hers, and she didn't own a car anymore. "Can I open it, Mom?" Ellie asked, already halfway through the tissue paper. "Go ahead," I said quietly, watching Amanda closely. Inside the bag was a stuffed sloth and a sparkly bracelet that blinked with tiny LED lights. Ellie squealed in delight. "Thank you, Auntie!" Amanda crouched to hug her, lingering a second longer than necessary. I caught the angle of her phone just as she pulled back. Click, twist 9. My stomach dropped. I stepped between them. "Okay, Ellie, go put your new bracelet in your room and wash your hands." She skipped off, humming. I turned to Amanda. "Delete it." She blinked, feigning innocence. "Delete what?" "The photo. You took one. I saw it. I just wanted one for the memories. She's my niece." "She's not a prop," I snapped. "You don't get to show up with cheap gifts, snap a photo and post it like everything's fine." Amanda's expression twisted. "I wasn't—" "Don't insult me, Amanda. I know exactly what you're doing." She straightened, defensive. "Mom misses her, so do I. And everyone keeps asking why we're not seeing her anymore. You've iced us out without explanation." "Because calling the police on a 5-year-old isn't something that requires a follow-up memo," I said flatly. Her face flushed. "That was an overreaction, but we were scared." "No, you wanted control, and when you didn't get it, you used fear and shame to lash out." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of the notification on her lock screen. A like on a recent post. I didn't even need to see it to know. She'd already uploaded the photo. I went back inside, grabbed my phone and opened social media. Sure enough, there it was, a photo of Ellie, blurry but smiling, hugging Amanda. The caption read, "Some bonds can't be broken, even when others try to stand in the way. Family first, always." The comments section was already growing. "Natalie's so cold. Glad someone still shows up for that little girl. Ugh," I screenshot everything. When I stepped back outside, Amanda was still there, scrolling her phone like she didn't just commit emotional blackmail in real time. "You have until sunset to take that post down," I said. After that, I sent a cease and desist through my lawyer. Her head snapped up. "You're overreacting." "No," I said calmly. "I'm setting a boundary, one I should have set years ago." She scoffed, muttering something about me being dramatic as she stormed off with Sophie in tow. But I wasn't shaken this time. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one trying to keep the peace. I was protecting it. Filing for a temporary restraining order didn't feel dramatic. It felt like finally locking the door that should have been shut years ago. I sat at the dining table with my laptop, Ellie colouring quietly on the floor nearby. The county court website made it surprisingly easy. I uploaded evidence, screenshots of Amanda's post, the burner email, the invoice for the toys disguised as plumbing repair. I checked the boxes next to both Lois and Amanda's names, explained in detail that this wasn't a family dispute. It was a repeated pattern of harassment and emotional manipulation aimed at a child. I clicked submit, and just like that, the wheels turned. There was no guilt this time, No second guessing, just clarity. Later that afternoon, as I was pulling weeds in the front yard, my neighbour Susan walked up the sidewalk holding a Tupperware container of cookies. She and her husband had always been kind, quiet people, big garden, never gossipy. She'd known my family for years, lived down the block since Amanda and I were teenagers. "Hey, Natalie," she said, setting the container on the porch rail. "Made your favourite," I smiled. "Thanks, Susan." She hesitated, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Mind if I ask something?" "Sure." She glanced towards Ellie's window, then lowered her voice. "I heard you filed a no-contact order against your mom." Twist 10 hit like a slap across the face. I blinked. "How? Did you hear that?" Susan shifted. "Lois came by yesterday. She was upset, said you were struggling, that you'd been overwhelmed since the divorce, that maybe you were going through something, depression maybe. She said she was worried about Ellie." I felt my pulse spike. "She said I was unstable." "She didn't use that word," Susan said quickly. "Just hinted at things. Said you'd changed. That she wasn't sure Ellie was safe without more support around." I laughed once, sharp and humourless. "Support her? Is that what she calls calling the cops on her granddaughter?" Susan's face faltered. "I didn't want to believe her. I've seen you with Ellie. You're a good mom. But the way she talked, she made it sound like you were shutting them out unfairly." I looked at Susan, at her kind eyes, the cookies sweating through the plastic. "She's lying," I said, calm and clear. "She's been trying to control me since I was a child. Now that I've stopped letting her, she's spinning a story to stay relevant." Susan nodded slowly. "I just wanted to hear it from you." "Well, now you have." She placed a hand on my arm. "I believe you, Natalie, for what it's worth." After she left, I went inside and sat at my desk. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I opened a blank document and began typing. Not for court, not for Lois, but for me. It was the last letter I would ever send. "Mum, you say I've changed. You're right. I've changed from the girl who begged for your approval, from the teen who swallowed every insult just to avoid another cold silence, from the woman who paid your bills and excused your manipulation. I've changed into a mother, and a mother protects her child. You tried to shape Ellie the same way you shaped me, with fear, with shame, with control disguised as care. But it stops here. This isn't a rebellion, this isn't revenge, this is a boundary. You don't have access to us anymore. Because I'm no longer the daughter who says yes out of habit. I'm the mother who says no out of love. Goodbye. Natalie." I hit print, folded it neatly, sealed the envelope. I didn't even bother addressing it. Just walked it to the trash, dropped it in and watched it disappear under the coffee grounds and broken crayons. I'd said everything that needed saying. The envelope came on a Thursday, plain white, with a state seal embossed on the front. Inside was the official documentation confirming what I already knew. The temporary no-contact order had been granted. It was real now. Not just a clicked checkbox or an email confirmation. Real, legal, enforceable. I held the papers in my hands and let the silence of the moment settle around me. No more texts, no more voicemails that started with, "I know we've had our differences," and ended with thinly veiled threats. No more unsolicited visits masked as checking in. For the first time in months, maybe years, my phone didn't feel like a weapon waiting to go off in my pocket. It was just a phone. I could scroll through photos of Ellie at the park, message her teacher, watch funny dog videos, and never once brace for a storm. That night, I read Ellie a story with dragons and brave princesses who fought for their own happy endings. She didn't cry, she didn't flinch. She drifted off in the middle of chapter 2 with a soft sigh against my arm. I lay there beside her for a while, staring at the ceiling, wondering why peace felt so foreign. Then came the fallout. 3 days after the order was delivered, I got a call from a shared acquaintance, Melissa, who used to work with Amanda. She said Amanda had lost her car, repoed. No payment in 2 months. Melissa didn't know I used to pay it. Twist 11 didn't come with drama, just quiet consequences. The next day, I got a medical bill in the mail addressed to my old apartment, forwarded by the post office. It was for Lois, an overdue balance from her cardiology clinic. A handwritten note in the corner read, "Patient no longer has active coverage." She'd lost her insurance. I hadn't cancelled it out of cruelty. I cancelled it because I couldn't afford to bankroll her anymore, especially after she lied about needing money for repairs and spent it on toys. I waited, half expecting an apology, even a rage-fueled voicemail. But there was nothing. No text from Amanda saying she was sorry for the photo stunt. No note from Lois acknowledging even a shred of regret. Just silence. And that's when it hit me. They weren't sorry. They were angry. Not at themselves. At me for finally saying no, for stepping out of the role they'd assigned me. The fixer, the financier, the daughter who understood. Now that I wasn't enabling their behaviour, I was the villain. And villains don't get apologies. Instead, I got subtweets. Amanda posted vague status updates like, "It's funny how the people who preach boundaries are the ones who need help the most." Lois dropped hints through old friends, saying she didn't recognise me anymore, that motherhood had made me cold, hard, unreachable. But I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Because the version of me they missed, she was built on guilt. She smiled when she wanted to scream. She gave until she bled and called it family. That version is gone. And this new one, she sleeps. She eats dinner without checking her phone every 5 minutes. She reads bedtime stories without mentally drafting responses to toxic texts. She walks into the preschool and holds her head high, even when a few parents still whisper behind their hands. One afternoon, Ellie came home from school with a drawing she'd made. Her, me, and a giant green dragon. When I asked her who the dragon was, she smiled and said, "He protects us, like you." I almost cried, but I didn't. Instead, I hung it on the fridge. Later that week, I started a new routine. Tea at 9 p.m, chamomile with honey. Just me, the quiet, and sometimes a book I didn't finish, because peace, real peace, is heavy and soft. It pulls you into sleep like a weighted blanket. Of course, the silence from Lois and Amanda wasn't truly empty. It was full of resentment, of stories spun to anyone who'd listen. But none of those stories were mine to carry, and I wasn't listening anymore. By the second week of quiet, something strange began to happen. We started to breathe. Not the rushed, shallow kind of breathing you do when you're surviving, but real breaths. The kind that fill your lungs all the way and don't carry a secret knot underneath. Ellie and I created a new rhythm without even meaning to. Our mornings became slow and soft. She helped crack eggs for breakfast while I made coffee. She stirred pancake batter with her whole body, tongue sticking out in concentration. I let her pick what vegetables we'd cook for dinner, even if it meant 3 nights of carrots in a row. We painted a mural on her bedroom wall. Just us, brushes, washable paints, and 0 rules. A rainbow, a sun with sunglasses, a dragon with glitter wings. It looked like a colouring book exploded, but she was proud. And I was too. Most afternoons, I helped her trace letters on wide-lined paper while she asked endless questions about how letters decided to look the way they do. She called question marks curly mysteries. I didn't correct her. Evenings became sacred. We'd read together, sometimes 3 or 4 books at a time. Some nights we'd turn off the lights and tell each other stories in the dark. She always made me be the dragon. "Because you're strong," she'd say. And I believed her. The quiet was no longer eerie. It was earned and healing. One Saturday, while reorganising boxes in the back of my closet, I found an old cigar tin, something my dad used to keep coins in. Inside were a few yellowing receipts, a key I didn't recognise, and a folded piece of paper with my name on it, in his handwriting. I froze. It was dated the year before he died. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Dear Natalie, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to give it to you. You've always been strong, not loud or angry, just steady. Even when people didn't see it, even when they tried to take it from you. Your mother doesn't understand your heart. She fears what she can't control, and you were never hers to control. I see that now. I saw it too late. I didn't stop enough. I didn't say enough. I let you fight battles I should have fought beside you. I thought protecting you meant not making waves. I was wrong. But you, Natalie, you have something none of us ever did, the strength to leave. I believe you'll break this cycle, that you'll give your daughter what we couldn't give you. And when you do, I hope you forgive me for not standing up sooner. I am proud of you. Love, Dad. I sat on the closet floor and cried in a way I hadn't let myself in years. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time I didn't feel alone in the fight. Even if he hadn't given me this letter while he was alive, he had written it. He had believed in me. And that belief, quiet, tucked away in a tin, it still mattered. That night, as Ellie curled up beside me in bed, I read her the letter. I simplified some parts, skipped others, but she listened like it was a fairy tale written just for her. Was that about you? She asked. Yes, I whispered. Was Grandpa scared? I paused. Yes, but he loved me. She nodded like she understood more than I expected. And he knew you'd be brave. I smiled. He did. She curled into me, small fingers holding the edge of the letter like it was magic. We lay there in the dim light, surrounded by silence that no longer threatened but protected. And I realised something. The cycle had already broken. Not with lawyers or paperwork, but with crayons on the wall, carrots for dinner, and a little girl who believed her mum was a dragon. Not because she was fierce, but because she was finally free. A month passed. 30 whole days without a text, a knock, or a new excuse wrapped in guilt and manipulation. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt earned, peaceful. It wasn't just the absence of chaos. It was the presence of something better. Ellie and I had settled into our new version of life. She no longer asked about her grandmother, no questions about Aunt Amanda, just new drawings each day, most of them featuring a green dragon with giant wings standing over a rainbow. This one's stronger than before, she'd tell me, adding scales or bigger claws. He doesn't let anyone yell at the rainbow anymore. At night, she no longer woke up crying, no trembling hands reaching for me in the dark, no whispered fears about being taken away. Just steady sleep curled beside me, or in her room filled with glow-in-the-dark stars and stickers we picked out together. One morning, over cereal, she looked up and said, "Mummy, did the bad dreams go away because we closed the door?" I paused, spoon halfway to my mouth. "What door, baby?" "The one with yelling behind it," she said matter-of-factly. "We shut it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, we did." She smiled and went back to eating. I spent my days working, writing, organising the closets I'd neglected for years. We planted herbs in tiny pots by the kitchen window. She made up songs about basil and rosemary. We baked cookies from a lopsided recipe card I found in a drawer, my dad's handwriting, and every night I told her stories where the dragons weren't monsters, but guardians. And then the phone rang. It was mid-morning on a Wednesday. Ellie was at preschool and I was on a Zoom call when the number flashed on my screen. Private, unlisted. I let it go to voicemail. But then a second call came. Then a third. Something in my chest twisted. I answered. "Miss Carter," the voice said. "This is Amy Michaels from Child Protective Services." I felt the air leave the room. Twist 13. "We received an anonymous report this week," she continued. "It alleges that your daughter Ellie is being withheld from her extended family and may be in an emotionally coercive environment." I sat down. "I'm sorry. What?" "I understand this is unexpected," she said calmly, clearly used to the shock. "We are required to follow up on all claims. Would you be open to a brief home visit to verify Ellie's well-being?" My pulse thundered in my ears. "Of course, she's at school right now, but I can schedule a time." "We prefer unannounced visits," she said gently, "just to maintain the integrity of the review." Of course they did. "Okay," I said. "Can I ask, did the report say who submitted it?" "Anonymous," she confirmed, "but we did receive copies of a recent social media post and a statement referencing a pattern of isolation." Amanda, it had to be. The photo, the captions, the public narrative that I'd cut them off, that I was unstable. All of it had been building to this. Weaponized whispers. That afternoon, Amy came by. She was polite, professional. She looked around the house, asked me basic questions, checked the fridge, the cabinets, the bathroom. When Ellie came home, she greeted Amy like any other grown-up, smiling, calm, curious. They talked for 10 minutes. Ellie showed her the dragon drawing on the wall. told her how we made muffins with chocolate chips and banana, showed her the sticker chart we used for brushing teeth. When Amy stood to leave, she said, "It's clear that your daughter feels safe here." I exhaled, knees nearly giving out. "Do you want to know my opinion?" Amy asked, her voice softer now. "Please." "This doesn't look like a cry for help. It looks like someone's trying to punish you." I nodded slowly. "That's exactly what it is." She handed me her card. "If anything else happens, if you get any more messages or interference, keep records, document everything, and if you feel unsafe, call us, or the police." I thanked her and she left. When the door closed, I slumped to the floor. I hadn't cried in weeks, but that moment broke me wide open. Not because I was afraid, but because they were still trying, even with legal orders, even with Ellie thriving, even after I chose peace, chose protection, chose to break the cycle. They couldn't stand it, because I wasn't playing the part anymore, because I'd chosen something else. Ellie came in from the kitchen holding 2 markers. "Can we finish the dragon's wings?" I wiped my eyes quickly. "Yeah, baby, let's do it." She plopped down beside me, already humming a made-up song, and I realised they could report me, smear me, threaten me, but they couldn't reach me anymore. Not where it mattered, not here. The next day, I didn't wait. I made copies of everything. Emails, screenshots, Amanda's social media post, the invoice Lois disguised as a plumbing emergency, and the court-approved no-contact order. I also requested a written statement from Ellie's preschool teacher, Miss Sanders. Within hours, she sent back a letter so full of kindness it made my chest ache. "Ellie is a thoughtful, gentle child," it read. "She is cooperative, social, and emotionally aware beyond her years. There is no indication of neglect, distress, or any red flags in her behaviour. She speaks lovingly and confidently about her home life. It is my professional opinion that she is being raised in a stable, nurturing environment." I forwarded it to Amy Michaels at CPS along with my own message, not just to defend myself, but to make something very clear. We were not victims of circumstance. We were survivors of something deliberate, and I wouldn't let them twist the truth anymore. That evening, after putting Ellie to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and opened a new document. Not a legal form, not a complaint. A letter, not for the agency, not for Lois or Amanda, but for the system itself, for the people on the other end of anonymous calls who don't know who to believe. It began like this: "To whom it may concern. This isn't a report. This isn't an accusation. This is a story. A story about a 5-year-old girl who was bright, expressive, and deeply empathetic. A girl who started having nightmares after a police officer showed up at her home, not because she did something wrong, but because her grandmother and aunt didn't like how she protected her space during playtime. It's also a story about a mother, me, who grew up in a household where control was disguised as tradition, and silence was the only acceptable form of survival. A household that taught me to bury my feelings so deep I almost didn't recognise joy when I finally found it. When I broke that cycle, when I said no, it wasn't received with understanding. It was met with retaliation, with character assassination, with accusations that weren't just false, but cruel. But this letter isn't about blame. It's about the many families who look perfect from the outside, who host birthday parties, post family photos, and smile through gritted teeth. While behind closed doors, children are taught that love is earned through obedience and fear. It's about what happens when one of those children grows up and chooses something different. I chose different, and I'm writing to say, please, when you receive anonymous reports that don't add up, when you meet a mother who seems calm on the surface but carries quiet trauma in her bones, listen. Listen to the child. Listen to the teacher who sees her every day. Listen to the life that's actually being lived, not the story being spun. Because blood doesn't always mean family. Sometimes blood is the bruise that never fades. Sometimes family is the person who finally says, no more, thank you for listening. Sincerely, Natalie Carter. I clicked print, folded it carefully, mailed it the next day, not because I had to, but because I needed to. I wanted it on record. That someone, somewhere, had chosen peace over tradition, truth over reputation, safety over appearance. That night, Ellie and I curled up on the couch under a yellow blanket. that smelled like fabric softener and popcorn. We watched a movie she picked, something about a girl and a talking raccoon saving a magical tree. About halfway through, she turned to me, eyes wide. "Mum?" "Yeah, baby." "Do you think our dragon would like this movie?" I smiled. "I think he'd love it." She grinned, then leaned her head on my shoulder. After a quiet moment, I whispered, "Hey, Ellie." "You know, family isn't always about who you're born to. It's not just blood." She looked up at me. "It's about who keeps you safe," I said. "Who lets you be yourself. Who you can trust to always tell you the truth." She thought about it, then nodded slowly. "So, you're my family." I kissed her forehead. "I'm your home." And under the soft glow of the lamp, with the dragons still on the wall behind us, I finally felt what I'd been chasing all my life. Not approval, not forgiveness, freedom.